Welcome back to The Explainer, Grade 9. Today, we are completely flipping the script. Instead of just sitting back and passively watching a movie, you're stepping right into the director's chair. We're going to look behind the curtain of movie magic to understand exactly how filmmakers take the written word and transform it into a visual and auditory masterpiece. Get ready, because you're about to see and hear your favorite films in a completely new way.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with our objectives, then move on to comparing book and film. After that, we'll unpack the visual toolkit and the sound toolkit, do a quick knowledge check, and finally get into producing your very own trailer. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. Objectives. Shifting to an active creator. Our goal today is simple but powerful. We are shifting you from a passive viewer into an active, critical creator.
Consider this your ultimate director's checklist. By the end of this explainer, you're going to master 3 distinct skills. First, you'll be able to confidently compare a written story to its film counterpart. Second, you'll know exactly how to analyze the specific visual and sound techniques directors use to tell that story on screen. And third, you're going to take all that theory and actually plan and produce your very own digital story trailer.
Section 2. Comparing book and film. Building our blueprint. Let's start with our first critical step. Every great movie adaptation starts with the original text, and understanding the gap between the page and the screen is where the real analysis happens.
When you're tasked with comparing a novel to its movie adaptation, it can definitely feel a bit overwhelming, right? Like, where do you even begin? Well, you have 4 reliable pillars to look at: setting, characters, plot events, and resolution. By comparing how these 4 elements exist in the text versus how they show up in the film, you get a really clear structure to work with. But remember, we don't just want a list of what's different. As a director in training, you want to use these categories to hypothesize why a filmmaker altered characteristics from the book. Did they change the setting to make it more visually dramatic? Did they cut a plot event to keep the movie pacing fast? This framework basically turns you into a film detective.
Section 3. The visual toolkit. Constructing meaning. Now that we've looked at the underlying story blueprint, let's open up the director's toolkit and examine exactly how meaning is built visually on screen.
Now, what's really interesting here is this concept of composition, or as film studies calls it, mise en scène. Basically, when you pause a movie, every single element you see in that frozen frame has been deliberately placed there by a director. Where the actors are standing, the props on the desk, the shadows on the wall, it is all intentional. Every single element of a visual image carries meaning. If a character is positioned entirely in the shadows, that tells you something about their motives before they even open their mouth.
And of course, how the camera actually captures that composition matters just as much. A director uses camera distance to completely manipulate your feelings. For example, an extreme close-up is perfect for high drama. Think of a tight shot focusing entirely on a character's tearful eyes. A mid-shot pulls back so we can see the character interacting with their environment, making it great for action sequences. And a long shot is often used at the beginning of a scene just to establish the setting and let the audience know where we are. Combine these shots with deliberate color choices, like stark black and white for subtlety, or bright, punchy primary colors for cartoonish mood, and you can really see how directors manipulate our interpretation of a scene without a single word being spoken.
Section 4. The sound toolkit. Emotional meaning. Visual images are only half of the cinematic experience. Let's transition energetically to the auditory side, which honestly can often do way more to pin down the emotional meaning of a sequence than visuals ever could.
Dennis Kelly's play DNA provides a brilliant breakdown of the audio landscape. Imagine you're trying to build the atmosphere for The Wood. You don't just point a camera at an actor talking in front of some trees. You build a layered soundscape. You have recorded effects like the wind rustling treetops or a woodpecker in the distance. Then you layer in the sounds created by the actors themselves, the heavy, dry crunching of autumn leaves or twigs violently snapping underfoot to build tension. Sound sets the 3-dimensional space and mood before you even fully process what you're looking at.
In film analysis, we divide sound into a few specific categories. The first is diegetic sound. The absolute simplest way to remember this is to ask yourself, can the characters in the movie hear it? If a character is talking, if their shoes are crunching on gravel, or if they're in a busy city and a car honks, those sounds emanate from the story world. They are diegetic.
But here's a quick question for you. Since diegetic sounds exist inside the world of the characters, does that mean they are always recorded live by the microphones on the film set while the camera is rolling? Take a second to think about how movie magic actually works.
The answer is an emphatic no. Just because a sound lives inside the story world does not mean it was captured on set. Sound engineers constantly manipulate things later. Sometimes a director forgets to shoot a line of dialogue, or an airplane flies over during a crucial emotional scene. The actor will actually go into a soundproof studio months later to re-record their dialogue, a process called ADR. Or maybe a party scene doesn't sound lively enough, so editors will punch up the background laughter and clinking glasses. Even the reality inside the movie is carefully constructed.
So, the crucial point is contrasting that with non-diegetic sound. This is sound that the characters absolutely cannot hear. It's added entirely in post-production for the audience's benefit. You know that sweeping orchestral score that makes you cry during a sad scene? Yeah, the characters aren't hearing a symphony orchestra playing in their living room. A dramatic record scratch sound effect added for comedy, or a voiceover narration explaining the plot. These are all classic examples of non-diegetic sound used specifically to manipulate our emotions and reactions.
And directors love to play with the boundaries using transdiegetic sound. This is a brilliant hybrid where sound bridges the gap. Imagine a scene ending with a character quietly humming a tune to themselves. That's diegetic, right? But as the scene transitions to the next location, that simple humming seamlessly swells into a massive orchestral version of the exact same tune playing over the landscape, which is non-diegetic. That transition creates a beautiful, subconscious link for the audience between the two scenes.
Section 5. Knowledge check. Test your ears. All right, it's time to test those ears with a quick formative check on these new concepts.
Picture the scenario. A character is driving down the highway, they reach over, turn on the car radio, and start singing along to a pop song. What kind of sound is that song? I'll give you a second to lock in your answer.
And this brilliantly illustrates the concept. It's diegetic sound. Sometimes it's specifically called source music or diegetic music. But because the character inside the car can literally hear the radio playing, it lives entirely within the story world. Excellent job if you got that right.
Section 6. Producing your trailer. Digital action. We've analyzed the texts, visuals, and audio. Now it's time for digital action, where you take all this theory and put it into practice.
Let's move to your final project and see how this all builds together. First up, you'll gather your media, downloading permitted clips using tools like Clip Converter. Next, you'll import those clips into your editing software, like iMovie or Magisto. In iMovie, this lives right in your event browser. And finally, the real directing happens in the timeline. This is where you quickly and deliberately assemble your clips, choosing exactly where to cut, deciding between a mid-shot or a long shot, and layering in your diegetic and non-diegetic audio to create maximum impact. You are now fully in control of the visual and sound toolkit.
All right, let's do a fast-paced recap of the exact concepts we mastered today on your director's journey. We learned how to use a structured framework to compare a written text to its film counterpart. We analyzed how a director uses visual composition, camera distance, and color to deliberately create meaning. We broke down the sound toolkit into diegetic, non-diegetic, and transdiegetic audio. And finally, we covered the technical steps you need to plan, assemble, and produce your very own digital story trailer.
So, I leave you with this final challenge. The next time you sit down to watch a movie or a show, tonight, this weekend, whenever, what hidden choices are you going to notice? Are you going to spot a deliberate extreme close-up? Will you hear a non-diegetic sound effect that's meant to totally manipulate your feelings? You now have the analytical lens of a filmmaker. Don't just watch the story, look at how the story is built. Have a blast editing those trailers, Grade 9, and I will see you in the next explainer.